Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 412 Test Wing Town Hall for this week. It's the 31st of March, and I first want to start off by thanking everybody for tuning in last week when we did our DEOX discussion. And this week, we're going to be talking about Air Force Force Generation and Deployment. So thank you all for tuning in. To get started this week, I would like to basically start with our Force Support Squadron upcoming events. PA is going to pull up some slides for us. Here we go. So April is the month of the military child. So on the 3rd, we will be doing the month of the military child kickoff. It's going to be at the Bailey and Branch Elementary Schools, as well as Desert Junior and Senior High. So parents, there's going to be a couple of lines to show appreciation and gratitude for being military connected. And you can go onto the website or the app for more details on that particular flyer there. Month of the Military Child, the signature color for that is purple. So these are the dates that each of the Fridays you will be able to wear purple to show your support for that Month of Military Child kickoff. Also in April, on the 4th, there's an April Fool's workout, so a high intensity interval training for anybody that wants to get a good workout in over at the fitness center. Also in April, we have Easter, so you can have breakfast with the Easter Bunny, followed by the Easter egg hunt on the 8th of April. In addition to that, there's going to be an education fair. So on the 5th of April, everyone is welcome to go over to the, where does it say? Hangar 1600 for the education fair. There'll be lots of area high schools and displays and information and probably plenty of vendors and contractors, and everyone's welcome to attend that one. The Family Child Care Town Hall is going to be on the 4th of April from 16:30 to 17:30, and that's going to be at the Child Development Center. So there's going to be lots of information on our child and youth programs. So if you're interested in that, please tune in for that town hall, or attend that town hall at that location. On the 7th is Hoops with Troops at the Youth Center Gym. So if you're between the ages of 9 and 17, you can go over and test out your basketball skills. Followed by, this is the plug again for the Easter Bunny breakfast. That's going to be on the 8th before the egg hunt. And that kind of wraps up our FSS slides. And I would like to introduce our guest speakers that are going to be talking to us today about Air Force Force Generation, also known as AFFROGEN. Today we have Colonel Michael Baker, the Air Force Test Center Vice Commander, and Ms. Jenn Star, the Installation Deployment Officer, here with us to talk about Air Force Force Generation. So welcome to the show, or welcome to our town hall, I should say. I always have a talk show in my mind, sorry. But welcome to our weekly town hall. You got me this week. The boss is running a little late, but he'll be here shortly to join us. In the meantime, I guess we can go ahead and get started, if you don't mind.
Sounds great.
Great. All right. Yep. Are you going to have the slides, PA, or are we going to do slides, or just?
We had some slides.
Okay, great.
Yes.
We'll give the PA here a second to pull up the slides and allow you all to get right into it.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenn Star. I'm the Installation Deployment Officer for Edwards Air Force Base. And next slide. We'll be talking about AFFROGEN. AFFROGEN, Air Force Force Generation, is the new concept for our deployment processes. In the past, we have used AEF for the rotation, and AEF was not working for the reasons on the screen. There was a 2018 readiness critical finding that identified that the Air Force as a whole couldn't present or account for forces and capabilities. So AFFROGEN was developed to be the resolution to this deficiency and to provide a more predictable and sustained force for the high-end fight. and also meet General Brown's goal of dwell for 1 to 3. The current with the AEF cycle was 1 to 2. And it also gives the ability for our teams to deploy together, so they will train beforehand and they will deploy as a team, so they will be a more efficient fighting force. Next slide. So the readiness framework, obviously we talked about the SecDef goal for the 1 to 3 dwell. And the force generation model is split up into 4 6-month periods. In the recent last couple of days, the ready phase has actually changed to certify phase. But you will have the available to commit phase, which is the cycle in which you would actually deploy. The reset phase, when you would come home, back to home station, and you would actually be able to recuperate, begin your home station integration again, get back into your squadron training before you start the prepare cycle again, which is where you would do your readiness training, and then your ready or your certify phase when you would actually be certified for your actual deployment. Next slide. The AFFROGEN transition. So I know a lot of you have seen the prior AEF schedule. This actually depicts how the AEF will be moving into AFFROGEN. Before we had the phases were P1, P2, P3, P4, and the X bands that coincided with a 6-month block of time with a 3-month overlap. AFFROGEN will not have the 3-month overlap. We will actually be operating off of 6-month phases, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and we will repeat the cycle every 24 months. So currently FY23 mission generation, which is deploying the iron, has actually already started. And we will be moving into FY24, in which all force elements will begin their initial operation or operational phase. P bands and X bands will change over to Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. They will X bands will be XA, XB, XC, and XD. So we will be losing, I believe P2 will be spread possibly across the bands, and then they will rework the X bands as well. So we will only have 4 phases. And if you've been talking with your unit deployment managers, the DX, DP, and DW will be going away. We will actually be posturing with a force element posture code. Next slide. Okay, so the force elements that AFFROGEN is comprised of are mission generation, open the airbase, command and control, establish the airbase, operate the airbase, robust the airbase, and demand force teams. It's very similar, actually depicted in the building blocks, the Lego blocks. And then we have expeditionary airbase, which is not a force element, but it is a capability, and it is comprised of the C2, EAB, and OAB elements. The thing about the expeditionary airbase is if we deploy an XAB package and the combatant commander opts not to elect to take the OAB package, that OAB package will stay at home station, but they will be ready or available to deploy if needed for that particular force element. So within each of the 6-month periods, there will be 10 XABs in that phase for a total of 40 over the 2 or 24-month cycle. Next slide. And we'll open it up for questions.
So if you do have any questions, you always know to text the 707-412-8922 number that you see on the upcoming screen. So please text in any questions that you may have while we have our experts here with us, and we'll see what comes in, ma'am. But if you could go back to the Lego slide, I do have a question as we await. So I noticed you said that we're going to be losing P2, and I can see the correlation between either, whether it's A, B, C, or D, or Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta.
Correct.
The associated P that used to be. So with the exception of P2, that's the only one that's going away.
So what they did to kind of move us into the first full phase of AFFROGEN, starting at October for XAB, they actually took P4 and I can't read the slide because it's too far away, I'm blind.
Can you go back?
So I believe they actually took
P6
P4 and P6,
Yes, ma'am.
correct. So P4 should have started in January of 2023. They delayed it and they pushed it and rolled it up with P6 to take up the first 6-month block, which is that Charlie? Yeah, Charlie.
Yes, ma'am.
Charlie phase. And so with that, the P2, so each of the other bands correlate to a P band that's already existing. P2 will kind of be, they're trying to figure out how to spread those across.
I was going to say, it'll just kind of merge into the others.
Correct. P2 really didn't affect us here.
Sure.
We were P1, P4 heavy in our cycles, but so I don't expect P2 is going to make a large impact to Edwards itself.
And you said we were delayed with kicking it off, so was it just Edwards that delayed, or
No.
the entire Air Force?
This is the cycle for all Air Force.
Okay.
Yes, this is the cycle for all Air Force. So they ran solely with, I believe, P3 and P5, and then they pushed P4 and P6 to Charlie phase, and then we're going to start with the P, I can't read that slide.
The green one?
No, yes, the green one.
P1.
P1,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
So
You have it
P1
there,
would
too.
be the next. Oh, I do, yes, thank you.
So P1. Okay, that's cool.
Yes.
Right now, I don't see any questions coming in. Colonel Baker, did you have anything to add or anything to piggyback on regarding the information that we have here?
Not specifically with AFFROGEN. First, I want to thank you and General Hager for inviting me down from the center to come speak to the 412 test
Yes,
wing.
sir, of course.
Yeah, Jen's talking about the AFFROGEN model. What I'm going to go into is really talk about how, 2 topics actually, how rated officers fit into a deployment construct, and then secondly, how the 412 test wing rated officers receive their deployment taskings. So let's talk about the first thing.
Yes, sir.
So when it comes to our rated officers, they're not going to participate in the AFFROGEN model, and here's the reason why: is because they are categorized as what's called institutional forces as opposed to operational forces. Institutional forces do not deploy in support of the UTCs.
Yes, sir.
And so as a result of that, there is a different tasking mechanism that comes down for the rated officers. And the way that works is, well, let me back up a step. There are 4,114 institutional force rated officers in the Air Force today. Now, our rated officers here at the 412 test wing fit inside that 4,000 so folks, okay? The way that works is that bucket of folks is responsible for covering down on about 120 taskings per band, okay? And so the way that works is the taskings come down from the combatant commander, and when they come down, they'll go to the headquarters Air Force, and the functional area manager will take those, and he'll distribute the taskings, or she will distribute those taskings across the MAJCOMs. And that distribution is based off the relative number of institutional force rated officers that each MAJCOM has.
Sure.
So when you look at the spectrum, ACC gets a lot of those rated officer deployment because they have far many rated officers than say an AFMC. We're more toward the bottom of the spectrum, which means we only get about 5 deployment taskings per band, which is pretty good.
Yes, sir.
So we'll take that. And so as a result of that, those taskings flow down from AFMC 3F down to the various centers within AFMC. And so basically they divvy out those 5 taskings the same way that the HAF did. They look across they look across the centers and the rated officers in each one of those centers, and they allocate the deployments based off the relative numbers.
Yes.
And when you look across all the 5 centers, 6 if you count IMSE, what you'll see is that AFTC has the large majority of rated officers.
Okay.
And so therefore, of those 5 taskings that we get, that AFMC gets, AFTC ends up getting 3 of those typically.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
It does.
The other 2 are distributed across AFRL, LCMC, AFMC headquarters. Once those taskings come down to AFTC, I take those taskings and then I distribute those taskings across
The
the
three
three
wings.
wings, which is Arnold, Eglin, and Edwards.
Yes, sir.
The 412 test wing, basically. And so and we do the same thing there, is we look at the number of rated officers and we distribute the taskings that way. So what that means for the 412 test wing is that they typically get 2 taskings per band.
Okay.
And the way that typically works is the OG will take those taskings and he'll look across his portfolio and then he'll make a determination of where he's willing to accept risk.
Sure.
Okay. And not only that, it's not like he can just go deploy anybody that's a rated officer at that point. He has to pick an officer that's sitting in the assigned band
Correct.
that the officer's assigned to.
Yes, sir.
So that's kind of the way the rated officers are deployed. Again, it's not part of the AFFROGEN model, and then also that's how we determine the number of taskings that you actually get here at the 412 test wing.
Cool, that's good insight.
So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Looks like we do have a question. I'll read it off here. Are there any specific issues with the transition that will affect Edwards? It's not clear how AFFROGEN appreciatively impacts the test enterprise. If one's primary job is flight test, how is test being viewed? What is the transition plan from X-band to Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta phases? I think that's like 5 questions.
Yeah, I can take a little bit of a hack at that.
Is it 4? Okay, there's 3 of
Yeah,
them.
so the majority of the folks that are here inside the 412 test wing are categorized in this institutional force bucket.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so so that leaves about 25 that are assigned to UTCs that will support the AFFROGEN model.
Okay.
So strictly from a test execution perspective, we're probably going to continue to do exactly what we've been doing in the past. So I see very little impact as we move forward.
I see.
Jen, do you have any questions about that?
No, I was actually going to say the same exact thing because I believe that the institutional forces, they will be the XA, XB, XC, and XD phases. They should transition just like the P-bands will, but I do believe we'll still continue to get the taskings the way we do, where they've identified the individual basically that will be filling that position.
Sure.
And just one note too, I forgot to mention this as I was going through, is most of the rated officer, the installation force rated officer deployments are for rotational staff positions. So again, this is maybe above the wing level that you see as part of the Expeditionary Air Force.
Yes, sir.
I will say that one thing I did say, just jokingly, to forget about what Jen had just briefed, but I will say that the band nomenclature will change. It will no longer be the X1, the X2, the X3. It will be X Alpha, X Bravo, X Charlie, and that will align with the AFFROGEN model.
Makes sense.
So.
Yes.
That keeps it from getting confusing.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't have that overlap anymore, and we're not X1, P3.
Right,
and-
that was
yeah.
confusing.
Yes, yes.
So I like that transition.
Yes, it should make it very easy.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Please text your questions in 707-412-8922. It's a lot of good insight here as to how this model is going to change and how it's going to impact Edwards. So I appreciate the 2 of you coming on to explain some of that. You're doing a way better job than I would have if I just gotten the read aheads and had to do this on my own. So yes, I do appreciate that. Are you getting flooded with phone calls? Are you blowing up email wise? How's that going?
Not yet. We're still working how it's going to actually affect Edwards. We should be getting a bit more fidelity within the next month. So X2 to be distributed between, correct, so that's what we were talking about. Yeah, so I would expect that as we have a bit more fidelity on how and what's going to affect Edwards for the actual, well, what was the P-banded personnel. The biggest thing to consider is we're not going to see much change, I don't think, in the amount and the career fields that are being tasked. It'll just be the way that they're tasked in keeping it more of a teaming concept.
Okay.
where they will train together, they will deploy together, they will return together, that type of concept.
So from what I'm hearing, you don't foresee any challenges to the way that we're postured with this new format coming on board?
So the way that we're postured,
Well, just the way that we've always done it.
So-
with all the changes coming, it'll
Correct.
be seamless to the people that normally go out the door?
for the most part, yes.
Okay.
For the most part, yes. The delay in capturing or moving the P4 band, to the October timeframe, gave everyone kind of a really good break. It gave them a nice 6-month time to kind of reset, get us prepared, for them to deploy in the October timeframe if we're looking at that. And I think it also will give the units a chance to digest because we also have brought on, AFPC has brought on a new Ready Airman Training Program.
Okay.
And the Ready Airman Training Program, I have my slides here. I actually had one slide, but it did not make the cut. So there are, with the legacy model, there was just-in-time training, there was combat arms, there was self-aid buddy care, there were a lot of courses that, there we go, perfect. Okay, so with that slide, you can see on the left-hand side, there's the legacy deployment requirements, the SEER training, things of that nature. With the ready training areas, they are much more defined. They give the commanders basically the tools or the capacity to train their folks in the way that they see fit. They still do have their requirements. So one of the things with AFFROGEN that came into play is the unit manning document. And there is the Forces and Infrastructure Code that is on the unit manning document. And if you do not have that on your unit deployment or your unit manning document, I would highly recommend it. The Forces and Infrastructure Code correlates directly with how your airmen are categorized in the Ready training module. So if they are a Category 1, they should be a Forces and Infrastructure Code 2. That means they are considered infrastructure. Now, those will change. They are playing a little bit of a catch-up game to get everything to align correctly. If we have a Forces and Infrastructure Code beginning with 1, that would be either an experienced airman, which would be a Category 3, or an inexperienced airman, which would be a Category 2. Category 3 will levy a little less training than Category 2 will. Recommend Category 2 being for the airmen that have like their first time deployers. But there are areas where the unit commanders can actually, if somebody briefs safety at a commander's call or something along those lines, then they can be signed off for one of their ready training areas.
Okay.
Because they've met that requirement.
Gotcha. Looks like we have a question. Thank you, ma'am, for that breakdown. I like that slide. It helps as well. It says that the numbers are not quite adding up. Can you get some clarification on the 2 per cycle aspect? In the last 2 years, someone from their squadron had somebody that was gone continuously.
Right.
And so if you could clarify that a little bit, and also how do you account for certain positions such as the 11 Golf not being able to be filled by 11 Foxtrot?
Yeah, we have to start charging for questions here, right? So yeah, there's obviously multiple answers to this question. So the first one being is most of the taskings that we get are for 11G folks. Now, 11Gs, what does that mean? That means that that's basically any pilot except for an 11F, which is a fighter pilot. And so I would assume that the reason we're seeing, this individual is seeing this in their squadron is at Edwards here, you can imagine there's a couple squadrons that have 11Gs, but the majority of them have 11Fs, okay? And so when we get these taskings and the tasking requires an 11G, which means I can't task an 11F to go do it.
Sure.
That means that all the squadrons that don't have 11F, then that's where the tasking falls upon. And there's very few squadrons here at Edwards that have other than 11Fs, right? So that's how I would answer that question. Let's see.
And then the two per cycle, does that?
Yeah, that's
does
been
that-
pretty consistent.
Okay.
That's been pretty consistent here at the test wing. We've been getting to, for the last, I think historically, the past 4 bands. At least that's what I've seen. At least that's what the data supports.
And then do you have anything on the DAV codes? Comments?
Yeah, well, the DAV codes is, if someone is coded with a DAV 64, they have been highlighted as that if that individual now deploys, that unit could potentially have mission failure. Okay,
Yes,
and
sir.
and let me give you an example of that. Maybe it's an aircraft that's very unique to the Air Force. There's not a huge inventory of them, and we have one individual in the squadron that is slated to test that aircraft or qualified to test that aircraft. If he's the only individual in the squadron that can fly that particular aircraft, and then we take him out of that squadron and deploy him, then obviously that opens the door for potential mission failure.
Yes, sir.
So that's what the whole DAV 64 thing is. But we want to be very careful about DAV 64s and not take advantage of coding somebody's. Having a DAV, first of all, having a DAV 64 doesn't mean you can't deploy. All right, so I don't make that point. That just means that in a list of priorities, they would probably fall to the bottom in
And
that
then,
list.
and
right?
then sending them out would be a risk.
Yeah, and
to
then
something,
yeah, exactly,
mission.
and that lets the leadership know that hey, if we do push this individual to the door, then we've created a risk that we need to mitigate.
Yes, sir.
So
Good clarification to all of that. Hi, sir.
Hello, Chief.
Welcome to the 412
Hi,
Test
sir.
Wing Town Hall.
Yes, thank you. Hack, it's 3 o'clock. Yeah, no. So, as I was miking up, I heard the question that Colonel Baker answered there. By the way, Biscuit, thanks for stepping up to this. Jen, as always, thank you. We have a Rockstar IDO for those of you that don't know what Installation Deployment Officer is. And I'm told that we got to reach back to A3F
We
to
do.
that person show up. So thanks to the Right Pat team for staying a little later on a Friday and supporting us. I also appreciate the agility in the orders while I was in a, I'll say, arm wrestle with higher headquarters. We'll leave it at that.
Yes, sir.
They
They told me to prepare to
prepare
kick
to
it
go
off, and I'm
solo.
like, I'm always prepared
Yeah, Chief
for a general officer
Chief runs the wing. I'm just the eye candy,
being delayed.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Gosh.
let me foot stomp a couple things. You talked about TPS. The decision we made in the center, previous center commander about TPS yet? Has that surfaced?
we did not talk about that. No.
Yeah, so as Colonel Baker was talking about, DAV 64's deployment availability code, and there's more than just the 64. Like I think I'm personally on a 37 right now for medical reasons. But there are other DAV codes that means this individual is not deployable until you exhaust all other resources, and then you go into that bucket.
Yeah.
That's effectively what it is. And so if everybody's on a DAV 64, then nobody's on a DAV 64.
Absolutely.
And that is then you get into how large is the denominator, how wide is the pool.
Yeah.
And it is a way for us as commanders and vices to tell the deployment machine, this is our top echelon of folks, take these folks first, and then we get scrubbed at the AFMC deputy commander level, so DCOM level, when we approve DAV 64s.
Yeah.
So this whole squadron's DAV 64, no, it has to be by individual.
Right.
And we generally don't have DAV 64s on every body.
Yes, sir.
Another thing that we made corporately, a decision we made corporately, previous Air Force Test Center Commander decision, was that if you are an instructor at TPS, because we, as Biscuit can tell you, we have a challenging time getting to our right manning levels at TPS, and therefore we're under-resourced, and we know that that is a critical node for all future test capability in our Air Force, and frankly beyond that. We've decided as Air Force Test Center not to deploy people while they're assigned as instructors at TPS until every other capability is gone.
Yes.
And there was a scenario, for those of you that remember back early in Secretary Mattis's time frame, where he actually told every single CONUS person to include all of AETC and all garrison forces, get ready to deploy, because if we got to go large on the peninsula, we're going to shut down a lot of other operations that have never been shut down before.
Yeah.
So it would take that level of a scenario that would drive us to deploy someone from TPS. Because of that, they're counted in the denominator that Colonel Baker has to negotiate with A3F.
Yep.
But we have said corporately as Air Force Test Center, we are not going to deploy those forces first or allow them to be in the normal rotation, because they're the seed corn generating the future force.
Right.
So that is another non-trivial factor in how we decide who gets the individual taskings. So there's an additional pile on there.
Yeah.
Biscuit, how many times you deployed since TPS?
I was slated to deploy once, and unfortunately had a medical issue, and the deployment was canceled. But I was on the hook for one, and when I showed up to my squadron, it was communicated very clearly by my squadron commander that that's the expectation. Is when I showed up that I would more than likely in my 3-year post TPS first test tour, I would have at least one deployment.
Yes. Yes, and so I should 20 years literally for me, 20 years since TPS now. But when I got to the 40th after TPS, we were watching 1 or 2 people go every cycle.
Yeah.
And overwhelmingly, everybody in their first assignment out of TPS had one deployment downrange that was based on the AFSC they had, or their core AFSC they had prior to test pilot school. And we're also deploying, as Jen remembers, a lot of engineers. Up until probably 3 years ago is when those started to drop off pretty
Probably,
aggressively.
yes. I wasn't in the IDO seat at that time, but I do remember deploying them in my previous job, yes.
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 So that has dropped off dramatically. Yes. In fact, really our taskings, I don't know, basically last time I saw something. So we have installation forces like security forces, a couple medical, things like that. I'm not talking allies welcome or CONUS deployments for pandemic support, right? Those are separate things.
Yeah.
But for overseas contingency operations, unless you are security forces or something else along those lines, garrison, we are getting 1 or 2, and they're almost always for rated background.
Yeah, that's what I was telling your viewers is we're typically, Edwards ends up getting about two per band. And I walked the audience all the way down from how they come from combatant commander through headquarters Air Force, down to the MAGCOM, and then down to the center, and then down to the wings. And how a lot of that distribution is based on the number of rated officers that sits in each of those MAGCOMs, and how that those relative numbers make the determination in how you receive the number of taskings that you actually receive.
Yeah. Yeah, so I suspect there's a lot of questions that are building up in the queue here. I hope that's the case. I would love to talk about your specific questions, and if it's from a position of I'm not familiar with that process, or I'm not sure exactly what AFFROGEN means writ large, I don't understand the gift map process between Colonel Baker, Chief, and I, and Jen and IDO, I think we can handle probably 90-95% of your questions, and if not, A3F can back us up. And if we still can't get to it, we'll get you an answer. So ask your questions. I want to highlight a couple things. If you can you call up the AFFROGEN chart that Jen briefed that has the Lego blocks on it, please? It would have been slide, and I'm not going to hold it in front of my face, but it's a slide titled Expeditionary Air Base. Yeah, so this is the construct that our Air Force, as a force provider, not the warfighter, but providing forces to the warfighter, i.e. the combatant commanders, is pivoting to. And then all deployable forces are going to know which Lego block they fit into, and I think we hit that already. Mostly, our rated forces are going to continue to deploy not in one of these Lego blocks.
That's correct.
They're going to augment other SecDef directed deployments for 1 or 2 off things to do things that are something that not an airman by rank, but an airman by culture is needed at that location. That was what my deployment was at a TPS. I was one of 5 airmen at a base of a few thousand military forces. Almost all of them were U.S. Army. And we were there to help them better use air forces and air power, and to liaise with the air component. So you will probably not deploy in one of these Lego blocks from here unless you're security forces or LRS or maybe command post. And the taskings on 6 months rotations will continue as they likely have been the last little while. Correct. We don't have a precise prediction going forward, but I want to just make sure those 2 concepts are well understood. And if that's a repeat, it's worth the foot stomp. If you didn't cover it that way, then when you hit it. Okay. Jen, I'm told you went elegantly and eloquently through your slides. Anything you wish you would have hit that you want a foot stomp or you didn't hit again?
So we were looking at the Ready Airman Training slide, but there was one more slide, I believe, that I had.
And it'll be the same question to Biscuit. Anything that you wish that you want a foot stomp or?
Yeah, just a couple points. So AFMC A3F did relay a message to us. A point I didn't make was currently we have 5 bands, X1, X2, X3, X4, and X5. As we transition to the AFFROGEN model, we're going to transition from a 5-band system to a 4-band system.
Correct.
Right.
So that was one point I wanted to make. And also just to piggyback a little bit on what Jen has already talked about, the idea between the AFFROGEN model is to increase, or I don't know if it's an increase or reduce, but keep you home longer. As reduce the dwell time from 1 to 2 to 1 to 3.
Increase the dwell time
In-
from 1 to 2 to 1 to 3.
Okay.
Yes.
Increased dwell time.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so I just wanted to talk about really what is driving that. The fact that the UTCs are planning, training, and deploying together, that results in more efficient teams.
Correct.
And the fact that we're at some point going to get the multi-capable airmen. The combination of those more efficient teams and multi-capable airmen are what is helping with the efficiency of the overall system.
Yes.
Which is what's underpinning that ability to stay home longer.
Go to the readiness framework chart for us, please. I want to loud and clear. So now that's a, I don't want to say check in the mail, but that's a, we think this is how this is going to fold out. And if you can deploy 10% less forces, you actually need a lot less than 90% because
Correct.
a lot of the overhead of just having the people there drives an additional downrange support load. And that's the benefits of this. So if everybody looks at the right side of the chart, the 1 to 3 ratio is you're available or deployed in that top right quadrant there, the available to commit quadrant. These are 6-month quadrants, by the way. It's a 2-year cycle. And then you get 6 months to do reset, and then 6 months to prepare, 6 months to get ready, and then you're on for another 6-month rotation. So that's the 1 to 3 ratio, which is actually 4 parts.
Right.
6-month cycles over a 24-month period.
Correct.
And the transition from 5 bands to 4 is happening in FY24, and right,
yes,
starting in October
yes.
of this year,
Yes.
FY24, and we'll be through that. We predict we'll be through that by the end of FY24. So October of 2024, we will be into this new battle rhythm. So during the transition phase, there are still going to be some. We got to rebuild the airplane. We got to put another engine on the airplane while it's still in flight, right? The Air Force A3 is pretty blunt in the meetings that I've heard him talk about this, and that transition is going to be a big lift in and of itself.
Yeah.
The juice is worth the squeeze, however, as we do this. So, any other things you want to foot stomp, Jen or Biscuit, before we get to questions?
So there was one question up there.
Yeah, can we go back to
before.
that one?
Yes.
Because we've been preparing for that
Yeah.
one.
So,
Yes.
so I gotta. These are the questions as they're queuing in. I don't know who's driving them, and they're probably in the booth, so they can't give me the verbals anymore. Can you guys open the window so we can talk?
There it is.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So let's talk about AFFROGEN and the building block model. So please go back to the Expeditionary Airbase Defined chart. If you look at the forces that are going to fall in on the open the airbase, command and control, establish the base, operate the base, and then if you look at those 3 components, so the two that are dashed around there, they are going to pull larger UTCs from locations that are not as tapped or tapped in that manner in the existing or previous construct. And so if AFFROGEN is going to potentially pull more from the base at one time, I think that is likely to be true, but the concept is not at any given point in time. It's what you do over a 2-year cycle, and the number of forces that we have that are downrange at any one time is supposed to reduce overall. But just like you can't deploy a fraction of a person, you also can't deploy a fraction of a capability
Correct.
from a base either. So
Right.
those, if you go, you go, and it kind of doesn't matter that you're the 1 out of 100, right?
Correct.
Or you're the one base that gets tapped. The initial laydown that I saw in AFMC in the area known as robust, the airbase, which would be the operate the base and throw command and control on top of it, did not have the 412 test wing listed in the robust the airbase phase, but it did have the 96 test wing listed twice. So I don't know where those came from. I don't think I know that's not the final list, and so that might there's some insight in there. Now, what would that look like? command posts, security forces, things that are the backbone of an installation, not from the mission generation forces on those bases.
Okay.
So another implication in this question is that are we going to get more forces in our garrison to handle these downrange commitments? I'll tell you the answer right that is an absolute one-word, two-letter answer, no. That's not happening. There's some implied questions behind that, but that's the answer. Biscuit or Jen, anything you want to pile on to that answer, or correct me 200% on, please?
No, I don't have anything else on that, sir. I think you're spot on.
I actually have a slide that would work to kind of help determine that. The alignment of positions slide actually had the pie chart. There you go, perfect. Okay, so the question was 25% of the UTC forces. So AFFROGEN doesn't want to take 25%. They want to basically take the FIC Forces and Infrastructure Code 1 personnel, which are considered to be the deployable positions, with the consideration that all airmen are inherently deployable, and the Unit Manning Document Forces and Infrastructure Code 2 infrastructure positions. And we will divide the total manpower within those by 5. And so you will always have, or the goal is to always have 80% of your forces at home station with 20% deployed. Obviously, there will be times when we will be doing a certification exercise or something along those lines that may take 20% or a group of the rated, or not rated, a group of the tasked individuals out of hide for a week or two while they're doing that exercise. But the goal is to maintain 80% of forces at home station while only preparing and deploying 20% at one time. So I hope that answers the question that was on the screen earlier.
So if the person that wrote in that question, if we didn't get to it, or you want to have a more detailed discussion, leave your contact information, and somebody will get back to you and hopefully answer those questions. They're answerable, and if we don't have the knowledge on base, we'll answer the question and get it to you. Now, the question is, are all rated officers in the test wing and in their band looked at equally for deployment? No. I've already elated to. So first of all, we don't get taskings to the test wing. We get taskings to AFMC for specific core AFSCs. Overwhelmingly, those are rolling in. Back me up here, Jen. Those are rolling in as 11G taskings.
Generally, yes.
That's correct.
Yes. So that's effectively any rated. We could fill those with 12s in almost all cases, as well. But primarily, they're showing up as 11Gs. Right now, by policy, there's a discouragement on filling 11G positions with 11F core. That's a decision that AFMC has, I'll say, some agency on. And Biscuit and I have talked about that a little bit. Colonel Mizell and I have talked about that a little bit. So it shows up to the MAGCOM, then the MAGCOM decides where to task those out to the centers, because they look at all of the available folks in AFMC. Within AFMC, the rated forces are in 4 places, and Biscuit, back me up on this. They're actually on the staff,
True.
the headquarters staff.
That's correct.
Right? They're in LCMC. They're in Air Force Test Center, clearly. And there's also a few in places like school at, well, not school, but in the lab or other oddballs in and around the organization. That's a really small portion. So primarily it's the headquarters staff, LCMC, and Air Force Test Center.
That's correct. There's a couple in the Air Force Sustainment Center, a handful in the AFRL.
Right.
So, yep.
So those effectively round to 0.
Yep.
So it's really those 3. And then within that, A3F coordinates with the vices and says, here's what we're looking at, rotation out. Here's what the fair share would look like. Go figure out a solution. Right. And then Colonel Baker, as the center vice, is the one that then looks to who could fill those and where do they fall. Yeah.
And just to pile on a little bit here, what AFMC A3F, they provide us with a data sheet of all the folks that are in that particular band, and it highlights whether or not they're sitting on DAV 64s, and it also highlights what their deployment history is, how many times they have deployed, and when did they last deploy. Right. So those are all considerations, I think, that goes into making the decision on who gets the deployment and not.
Yeah.
So
So I think the root of that question, if you can go back to that question, please. The root of that question really gets down to, and this was a critique that I heard loud and clear in a town hall on St. Patty's Day, right? So, and I had a conversation with that specific officer, I believe it was later that weekend. And I think that at least part of the core of that question, there's actually two main parts, but the part that drove home to me in that, and I remember feeling it myself when I get my tasking, is predictability, right? If I had known I was gonna deploy for this, in my case, 5 and change month window, or now they're like 6 and a little bit window, if I had known that for the last 18 months or 2 years, I would have made different commitments for my leave, different commitments at home, different commitments for my project pilot commitments, and my squadron would have made different decisions as well. So predictability is a real issue there, both for your personal life, but also for your professional development, and also for the unit, and how do we flow our very limited, our low density, high demand test experts, right? And so I directed, I won't say a solution, but I directed implementation of a process internal to the 412 test wing to hopefully increase some predictability, which parallels what we used to think of as bands, but candidly, we're not bound by the bands, but we are bound to deliver forces when tasked.
Yes.
Now, the other part of that discussion, and I don't know if you've hit it already, Biscuit, let me know and I'll stop talking, is, well, I remember AFMC commander used to say we do our wartime mission every day at FMC. Why am I deploying for my wartime mission to support another wartime mission? Right. That's not a trite question. That's a real question, right? I mean, there's only one project pilot for KC-46. There's only one project lead pilot for VC-25B. Right. There's only one Tech Refresh 3 project pilot for F-35. I mean, so those are actual people generating future capability that are in today's fight. Agree, concur, understand. General Durteen, Colonel Baker, myself, the A3, Major General Select Kane, we all communicate the decrement or risk that the Air Force or the services are buying by deploying folks from that pool in support of SecDef taskings. And the risk is considered and accepted at their level. Right. So my job as a wing commander and Biscuit's job as a center vice, trying to make sure we impact lives as little as possible, is to add predictability, even if we can't decrease the number of actual taskings that flow. So I think those are the two pillared things there. Now, what did I direct the OG to do? I directed the OG to have in every band, 2 years out at a minimum, in every one of those bands, 2 names pre-designated, one 11F and one non-11F in every band out. And for those officers to know, you're the name, if we get tapped today in that band, you're the name that's gonna go, plan accordingly. Yes. If something happens and you need to move, cool, I'm out. No, I now have a conflict. Who's the replacement, right? So there's a warm handoff. Now, full disclosure, I'm not giving that list to A3, and I'm not giving that list to your replacement. Now, ironically, the guy that's building that list for me is gonna be a replacement, and I'm gonna give him the white flash of light, but I don't want that list held against us. And Jenn's gonna help me out with that. The team here will help us out with that, because we may not need to deploy those 2 officers, and if we don't, fantastic. But if those 2 officers, if we need to deploy 1 or 2, now we've added some predictability into the unit, into their test mission, and into their lives. Correct. Right? If you have a choice on when to go on an anniversary event, or do you have your parents host their 50th or your grandparents host their 50th anniversary 2 months earlier or 2 months later, well, that's a factor that you can fold in that we would try to consider in real time, and the longer out we can predict it, the better. Yeah. So those are I actually took that action on Friday after we had a lengthy discussion in Jenn's nicely climate-controlled sipper room. Right, okay.
Very toasty.
It looks like we've had a lot of the same questions that come in, sir.
Yes.
I will ask and request that you make sure that your questions are respectful and tactful, or I will respectfully ask them to skip that question and we will take it offline. So if you would like, we could keep with the same topic or move into some of the other questions.
So what I'll do is, we're kind of right at time, but I'm okay tipping over a little bit. I don't know who's driving. I can't see beyond the lights. Any other, so I don't want to go to CACs yet. Anything else from deployment that you want to get from the list?
I've had them skip some of them for
Okay.
offline discussions.
Sounds
I think
good.
we can get
Hey,
more
again, if you have a
elaborate.
specific question about something and you're willing to be attributable, great. Let us know. If you want to keep it generic, at least give us the unit, and we'll try and feed that back through into the unit. I completely understand this awkward and often extremely frustrating position that it can place us all in. Before we pivot away from the deployment thoughts, let me give you this. At the end of the day, when we decide to wear an airman uniform that is not like the one Jenn's wearing today, we voluntarily give up some of our decision space, right? Which you get back when you promote back to civilian. And there are some significant benefits to our nation for taking someone from the test community with that level of leadership skills and building teams and finding solutions from places that are not just normal and not just repeat, that are of great value to the downrange unit. You're an unabashed and unapologetic airman as well, and that will also infect the joint force and make the joint force better. And in almost all cases, I can't definitively say every, but in overwhelmingly all those cases, you as an officer, and certainly for the enlisted forces as well, but absolutely as a test professional officer, you're going to learn something downrange that will be of value to you later in your career. And I don't have enough time left on this broadcast to tell you the things that I learned while I was downrange deployed with a 2-star Army command that had nothing to do with tests that I was able to use later in my leadership positions, 2, 3, 4, 5 assignments later.
On the enlisted side, we often found, especially in the communications career field, that you would be tasked for something, and when you arrived, you would be doing something totally different.
Absolutely.
And so we never really held to what was on the tasking until we got there to find out what it was truly going to be. And sometimes the mission dictates that you do something different. So I hope everybody has an open mind about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also very aware of the spread, right, or the disproportionate spread, and we are constantly attacking the denominator at the MATCHCOM level and below. That helps a lot too. And oh, by the way, if you're a person that's downrange and you think the job doesn't need to be done by somebody rated or somebody in the Air Force or shouldn't be done at all, while you're down there, talk to the J1 and get the darn thing turned off.
Yeah.
Right? There's nobody in a better position to talk about the value of the job than the person that's in it. And so that's another super valuable thing. All right, with that as the reminder, happy to discuss that at any forum at any time with anyone that wants to talk about it further, especially detailed questions. So let's pivot to CACs, Common Access Cards. All right, Chief, you're the comp troop. Why don't you read this one and we'll see if we can get to it.
Hello, could you discuss the change of policy for retired civilian CACs? Will retired civilians need to have a sponsor? Will they be stopped at the gate every time they would like to use space services such as the library? Will there be an official all-con email about it? And we have already had people surprised to learn about the change. So there's several questions there. That's a trend for today, so I commend them. Looks like FSS has already chimed in with a response. The policy is driven from top down across the DoD, Department of Defense. We plan to post updates to the edwardsfss.com website under the MPF section. So there will be more information to follow as there is a scheduled telecon next week. So we'll be getting an update on CACs.
Yeah, can you go back to the first question, please? One of the things that I want to make sure is, Chief and I certainly get, and so does FSS, we understand the intent of the question there, but after you're no longer in service, unless you happen to be volunteer, and that's a unique exception in this, but after you retire, you don't get a common access card. The common access cards are the ones that allow you to get on DODN, and they're the ones that have the chips and all those things. So it's just, but it's a DoD ID card. And so when Chief and I and Colonel Baker step over the side from our military career, we will also end up with an ID card that will no longer be a CAC. And that policy change was any policy changes like that are not always awesome, but there's a path forward to arriving at resolution in your specific case without usually within our control. So now, another thing that I would ask is that sending out emails can't get to the people because we don't know how to reach all those folks or everybody that would affected. So we will do our level best to continue to post information so that you can pull from our locations. In addition to the FSS, edwardsfss.com site, you can always go to the Edwards portal, which is www.edwards.af.mil. That's our portal. Or you can download the app in the Speak to Commander category and ask your question. Those are monitored 24/7, 365. They're filtered off to the right place, and then we repost it into something that, if it's appropriate, into some place that can be seen by everybody else. So I get it, and if you're a retiree, a civilian retiree, that's a different category of benefits than a military retiree. That's the way the rules and the laws are written, but that isn't a difference in value from the enterprise. It's just a difference in the policy, and we want to make sure that your service is respected to the max extent as well. Okay, so FSS is going to get more on that. If you are interested in knowing personally, please leave your name and contact information in the 707-412-8922 line, and we'll try and get back to you direct that way. And the Retiree Affairs Office will also be a good single point of contact for you as well, not just the military retirees. Okay, we're slightly over minutes. We'll go to one more, and then we'll close out. Oh, look at that. We'll go to one more, and it's no additional questions. So I actually didn't know that. So
Maybe they have questions for us, our guests.
Free shots on out to the world. Jenn, anything you want to know out of the chief?
Actually, we had a very nice conversation before we started, so I think I'm good.
Awesome.
And, yeah.
Okay, Biscuit, anything?
Nope, I'm good, sir.
All right. Folks, I appreciate your time and attention here today. I know they won't be able to hear it through the internet or through our pipes, but give the virtual round of applause for both Ms. Star and Colonel Baker for joining us and adding their expertise. And also, do you know who from A3F was online with us?
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Red Johnson.
Okay, Red, thanks.
Yep.
Red, you're a great advocate for the team. Please tell your boss that we all are sad to see him leave his current job into his next, but we congratulate him on his promotion. And thanks for doing what you do there with you and the A3F team for all of the test enterprise. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for your expertise. I appreciate you stepping up to the plate on this and all topics. Chief, I'll let you give your final thoughts for the week, and then we'll get everybody off into what is going to be a phenomenal weekend weather.
Yes. You mean that really seriously?
Yeah,
Not facetiously?
the forecast is tremendous right now.
Okay, good,
For
'cause
the
this
next
is-
like 10 days.
The wind and rain,
And
over
you and I
it.
are not going to be here.
Okay,
for,
yeah,
for,
we're
for
gonna
the
miss
first
it.
week of that. Yeah, we're going to be at right path. So
I will just say that I had a very full cup leaving the Air Force Sergeants Association Summit the early part of this week. And, we had over 25 chiefs there, lots of great perspectives about what the chiefs have experienced throughout their careers, and also a lot of information about what the Air Force Sergeants Association does for our military and their families. And so if you are not a member, I would highly recommend that you go out and read up on that. A lot of the misconception or misnomer about AFSA is that you have to be a sergeant, and that's not true. So please go out to the websites and look at the legislative tab, I believe it is, and look at what AFSA is fighting for all the time so that we get benefits and incentives as military members and our families receive those as well. And other than that, sir, I just wish everyone a great week coming up while we're out at the Senior Leader Conference, continuing to be a good advocate for the things here at Edwards, such as quality of life, and over to you to say goodbye.
yes, thanks, Chief. Yes, Chief and I are going to be at the Air Force Material Command Senior Leader Conference, spring conference next week, all week. As part of that conference, we get the ability to interface directly with the AFMC Top 4. We usually end up hitting the installation issues super hard. I'm not going to go over time even more to list what those issues are, but we are, I'll say, gaining traction. So I'm going to do a dog analogy here for those of you that are dog owners or dog people. Chief, I actually think that we've got a little pit bull action going. We've got the scruff of the neck, and we're kind of grinding at the jugular to get to the way to get to the win.
Yes, sir.
On apartments, right? We are making some massive progress. As an example, now doesn't matter how hard you work, doesn't matter how far you get if you don't deliver. So if we don't deliver, I'm not going to take credit for any of this, but I think we're further along than we've been on the apartment complex than we ever have been. And to give you the level of engagement, we got Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force engaged on that by name, by specific with OSD. And I'm predicting some good information here, or at least good decisions sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yes,
And there are a whole bunch of other topics like that that we'll keep you posted as they break. Speaking of awesomeness and stuff that's going to happen next week, as part of the every spring Senior Leader Conference at AFMC, they on usually Wednesday or Thursday night, but typically Thursday night, we have the awards banquet for the AFMC annual award winners. Your Team Takata Team Edwards 412 Test Wing folks that are competing because they won at the test center level are Senior Master Sergeant Tab, Mr. Coco, Major Sullivan, and Master Sergeant Hansen in their respective categories. They're all traveling. They're all going to be there in person.
Yes.
A couple of them are bringing their +1s, and I think we got some really competitive folks there for MatchCom level winners.
Yes, sir.
And I look forward to shaking their hand as they walk off stage. A little piece of trivia, which I'll let folks go Google or go look. What is the trophy that you get if you win at the AFMC level? And if you know the answer to that, text it in for the next town hall. And I bet we'll have more than one to show back here at the 412 Test Wing after the week. So that is our as my prediction for success. Before we hit the awards banquet this week, I'll pivot to a thank you. Hey, thank you, Team PA, that host this. We're in the new studio, or the updated studio. It's working very well. Thank you for the remote site work you did. Thank you for all the events that you support around the base. You're a true enabler, and I think we operationalized very well in the pandemic that'll benefit us all going forward. And then thank you to everyone watching and participating and engaging with us, both during these town halls, this town hall today, but also between them, to float the topics or the things that you want to know or that you'd like us to get more information out on. This doesn't work without your level of dialogue and without your engagement, and Chief and I are happy to burn these resources and time to have this engagement with all of you. Let us know if we're not hitting the mark or if there's another mark you'd like us to shoot for, and we're very happy to get there. All right, and no joke, I was not kidding about the weather. The forecast is phenomenal, and I actually think we've had enough rain, so the poppies are probably about to pop. So if you are new to the Aerospace Valley and can get up to the west part of the valley in the Poppy Preserve, it should be pretty awesome. I love it, and I'm excited about it. So with that, folks, be safe, be well, enjoy. Thanks for doing all you do, and so long for now from the center of the aerospace testing universe.